A man discovered that the woman feeding him lunch on a park bench every day for 31 days had no idea he owned the building she was about to be evicted from. And what happened when she finally found out didn't just shock him. It made him tear up a contract worth $2 million. For 31 days, a woman in a faded green apron carried a paper plate across a parking lot to a man sitting on a bench outside a construction fence. She never asked his name. He never told it. She gave him rice and beans and cornbread and sweet tea. And she said the same thing every time. "Eat before it gets cold, baby." She thought he was homeless. He thought she was the only honest person left in the city. They were both wrong. And when the truth came out on day 31, standing in a parking lot that smelled like demolition dust and fried onions, everything both of them believed about the other fell apart and rebuilt itself into something neither of them expected. Hello and welcome. If this is your first time here, please subscribe. If you've been with us before, thank you for coming back. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Miami, Cape Town, maybe Port of Spain or Birmingham? We want to hear from you. Now I want you to pay attention to this story, because it's about something that happens in every city, on every street, in every neighborhood where the buildings are getting taller, and the people who built the neighborhood are getting pushed out. It's about a woman who fed people because feeding people was all she knew how to do. And it's about a man who had forgotten what it felt like to be seen as a human being instead of a signature on a contract. Pay attention, because the moment everything changes is so quiet, you might miss it if you blink. Her name was Opal Washington. She was 63 years old, a round woman with wide hips and thick ankles and arms that could carry 2 full sheet pans from the oven to the counter without trembling. She had deep mahogany skin that glowed in kitchen light, a broad nose, full cheeks, and eyes that crinkled so deeply when she laughed that they nearly disappeared. She had a gold tooth in the back left side of her mouth that flashed when she smiled wide, and she smiled wide often, the kind of smile that made strangers feel like they'd been welcomed into a house instead of a conversation. She wore her hair in a silk wrap every day, always a different color, always pressed flat, always neat, because her mother told her when she was 16 that a woman's head covering was her crown, and you don't leave the house without your crown. Opal had a uniform: green apron, white shirt, black pants, black shoes with rubber soles that had been resoled twice. She'd been wearing some version of this uniform for 41 years, since she was 22 and started cooking at her Aunt Dovey's restaurant on Magnolia Street. Aunt Dovey's was not a restaurant in the way people use that word now. No menus printed on thick paper, no wine list, no reservations. It was a narrow brick building with 6 tables, a kitchen the size of a bathroom, a screen door that slammed shut behind every customer, and a handwritten board on the wall that listed what Aunt Dovey felt like cooking that day. Monday was oxtail, Tuesday was smothered pork chops, Wednesday was catfish and grits, Thursday was red beans and rice, Friday was fried chicken. Always fried chicken, because Aunt Dovey said a week without fried chicken was a week without purpose. Aunt Dovey died when Opal was 34. She left the restaurant to Opal in a will written on the back of a church program in ballpoint pen. The lawyer said it might not hold up. It held up. Opal took over the kitchen and the lease and the 6 tables and the screen door and the handwritten board, and she changed nothing. Nothing. She kept the same menu. She kept the same hours, 6 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. She kept the same prices, which she raised only once in 29 years, and only by 50 cents, and only because the cost of cooking oil made it impossible not to. A full plate at Opal's cost $5.50. It came with a main, 2 sides, cornbread, and sweet tea. For $5.50, you got fed the way your grandmother would feed you if your grandmother loved you more than anything in the world. The restaurant didn't have a name anymore. The sign that said Aunt Dovey's fell down during a storm 15 years ago, and Opal never replaced it. Everybody in the neighborhood just called it Opal's Place. You didn't need a sign. You followed the smell. On any given morning, the scent of frying onions and simmering stock drifted from the kitchen vents and curled down the sidewalk and hooked itself into your nose and pulled you in like a hand on your collar. Opal lived alone. She had never married, though she had been engaged once at 28, to a man named Curtis who drove a delivery truck and who proposed to her with a ring he bought on layaway from a pawn shop. Curtis was kind but weak, and weakness and kindness are a dangerous combination because it means a person will break your heart without meaning to and feel terrible about it and still not stop. Curtis left after 11 months. He moved to Baltimore. He sent a letter 6 years later apologizing. Opal read it once, folded it into a square, and used it as a bookmark in her Bible. She never wrote back, not because she was angry, because there was nothing left to say. Opal had no children. She had a niece named Simone who was 32 and worked as a hotel receptionist and who visited every other Sunday for dinner. Simone was thin, quick-talking, with box braids and a laugh that came out like a cough, sudden and loud and gone. Simone worried about Opal the way children worry about elderly parents, even though they weren't parent and child. She worried about the building. She worried about the neighborhood. She worried about the fact that Opal had no savings, no retirement plan, no backup. "Auntie, what happens if the building sells?" Simone asked one Sunday. Opal was washing dishes. "Then I find another kitchen." "There is no other kitchen, not at the rent you're paying. This neighborhood is changing." "Neighborhoods always change, baby. People don't." Simone sighed. "That's the problem, Auntie. The people are changing too." She was right. The neighborhood around Magnolia Street had been shifting for 5 years. New buildings going up, old buildings coming down. Coffee shops replacing barber shops. Condominiums replacing row houses. Rent doubling, tripling, quadrupling. The families who had been there for generations, the ones who grew up eating at Opal's place, who had their birthday dinners at table 4, who brought their children and then their grandchildren, they were leaving, not because they wanted to, because they couldn't afford to stay. Opal watched it happen from behind her counter. She watched the construction cranes swing overhead. She watched the dumpsters fill with the guts of old buildings. She watched the new people walk past her screen door, glancing in, not stopping, not smelling what she was cooking, not hearing the screen door slam, not knowing what they were walking past. But Opal kept cooking. $5.50 a plate. 6 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. Every day except Sunday. She kept cooking because cooking was the only language she spoke fluently. And the people who still came, the old regulars, the construction workers from the sites, the bus drivers on break, the woman from the dry cleaners who ordered smothered pork chops every Tuesday like it was church. They still needed to eat. And Opal believed, with the unshakable certainty of a woman who had been feeding people for 41 years, that as long as somebody was hungry, her kitchen had a purpose. But what happened next changed everything. The man appeared on a Monday. Opal noticed him because he sat on the park bench directly across the parking lot from her kitchen window. The bench under the sycamore tree that the city had been threatening to cut down for 2 years because its roots were cracking the sidewalk. He was there when she arrived at 5:30 in the morning, and he was still there when she opened the screen door at 6. He was maybe mid-50s, though it was hard to tell. He was wearing a dark jacket that was too heavy for the season, work boots that were scuffed but not cheap, and a baseball cap pulled low over his forehead. He had brown skin, a short graying beard, and hands that he kept folded in his lap or pressed against his knees. He sat very still. He didn't have a bag. He didn't have a phone. He didn't have a sign. He just sat on the bench and looked at the construction site behind him, where a crew was demolishing a row of old storefronts to make room for something new. Opal watched him through the kitchen window while she chopped onions. She watched him for 3 hours. He didn't move. He didn't eat. He didn't talk to anyone. At noon, Opal made a plate. Rice, red beans, cornbread, a cup of sweet tea. She carried it across the parking lot in the green apron with the kitchen towel over her shoulder, and she set the plate on the bench beside the man. "Eat before it gets cold, baby," she said. The man looked at the plate. Then he looked at Opal. His eyes were dark and tired, and held the expression of a person who has been stared through so many times that being seen felt like a physical sensation, like stepping into sunlight after years underground. "I didn't order this," he said. "Nobody ordered it. I made it because you're sitting here looking hungry and I've got food. That's all the math I need." He looked at the plate again. Then he picked up the cornbread. He broke it in half. Steam rose from the center. He took a bite and closed his eyes. "This is the best cornbread I've ever had," he said. "I know," Opal said. And she walked back across the parking lot and through the screen door and went back to her kitchen. The man ate everything. He set the empty plate on the bench beside him. He didn't bring it back. Opal sent Simone's son, a teenager named Darius who helped out on weekdays, to collect it. The next day, the man was on the bench again. At noon, Opal made a plate. Smothered pork chops this time. She carried it across the lot. "Eat before it gets cold, baby." The man smiled, just slightly, just enough. And that was only the beginning. Every day for 31 days, Opal carried a plate across the parking lot at noon. She never asked his name. She never asked where he lived. She never asked why he sat on that bench from dawn to midday watching a demolition crew tear down buildings. She just brought the food and said the words and walked away. The man, and this is important, never told her his name either. He accepted the food. He ate every bite. He set the plate on the bench. Sometimes he said thank you. Sometimes he just nodded. Once, on day 12, he said, "The catfish today was perfect." Opal said, "It's always perfect. That's not news." He laughed. It was the first time she heard him laugh. It sounded rusty, like a gate that hadn't been opened in a long time. But what Opal didn't know, and what nobody on Magnolia Street knew, was that the man on the bench was not homeless. His name was Nathan Cross. He was 56 years old. He was the founder and CEO of Crossmark Development, a real estate development company with a portfolio of 37 commercial properties and 14 residential projects across 3 states. His net worth, on paper, was somewhere north of $40 million. He wore the scuffed boots and the heavy jacket because he had a habit, a private, personal habit he told no one about, of visiting his development sites in plain clothes before construction began. He wanted to see the neighborhoods the way the neighborhoods saw themselves. He wanted to sit where the people sat and watch what they watched and understand what was being lost before he built what was coming. It was a practice his father had taught him. Nathan's father, Roland Cross, was a bricklayer who built houses by hand for 30 years before his knees gave out. Roland used to say, "Before you build on a man's land, sit on it first. Feel what it feels like. Know what you're replacing." Nathan had been doing this for 20 years. He had sat on benches in 12 cities. He had watched neighborhoods change from the inside. And in 20 years, nobody had ever brought him a plate of food. Until Opal. Now here is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. The Magnolia Street development was Nathan's project. Crossmark Development had purchased the entire block, 8 storefronts, 2 vacant lots, and the parking lot between them. The plan was a mixed-use development, ground floor retail, 4 stories of apartments above, a rooftop terrace with a view of the city skyline. The projected value was $68 million. The demolition had already begun. Opal's building was included in the purchase. Her landlord, a man named Gerald Fitzhugh, had owned the building for 19 years. He had never raised Opal's rent beyond what she could afford. He liked Opal. He ate at her restaurant every Thursday. But Gerald was 73 and tired, and when Crossmark offered him $1.2 million for the building, he took it. He told Opal he was sorry. He told her she had 60 days. Opal received the notice on day 14 of feeding Nathan. She read it standing at the kitchen counter, the smell of frying onions filling the room, the screen door propped open with a brick, the sound of the demolition crew's machinery grinding behind the parking lot. 60 days. 41 years in this kitchen. 60 days. She folded the notice and put it in her apron pocket. She finished the lunch rush. She made Nathan's plate. Fried chicken, collard greens, mac and cheese, cornbread, sweet tea. She carried it across the lot. She set it on the bench. "Eat before it gets cold, baby." Nathan looked at her. He could see something different in her face. The crinkles around her eyes were deeper. The smile was the same, but the energy behind it was different, like a light that was flickering. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine, baby. Just a long day." She walked back across the lot. She didn't look back. If she had, she would have seen Nathan watching her through the screen door with an expression she would not have understood. Because Nathan had read the acquisition documents for every building on the block. He knew the tenant list. He knew the lease terms. He knew that Building 4, the narrow brick building with no sign and a screen door and 6 tables, was occupied by a month-to-month tenant named Opal Washington, who operated a food service establishment generating less than $4,000 per month in revenue. He knew she was being evicted. He had signed the documents that made it happen. And every day, for 17 more days, she brought him a plate of food and called him baby and told him to eat before it got cold. And every day he ate it, knowing what he had done to her. But this story is far from over. Nathan could not sleep. For 17 nights he lay in his bed in a house that had 6 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, and a kitchen with a marble island and a refrigerator that held more food than Opal served in a day. And he stared at the ceiling and thought about cornbread and sweet tea and a woman in a green apron who fed strangers because that was all the math she needed. On day 23, Nathan brought the plate back himself. He walked across the parking lot, opened the screen door, it slammed behind him, the way it slammed behind everyone, and stood inside Opal's place for the first time. It was small, smaller than he imagined. 6 tables, plastic chairs, a counter with a glass case that held the cornbread and a sweet potato pie, and a plate of lemon squares covered in powdered sugar. The walls were covered with photographs, decades of them. Birthday parties, church groups, little league teams. Families posed at table 4 with plates piled high, grinning, grease on their chins, sweet tea in their hands. The photographs went back 40 years. They were the history of a neighborhood told in meals. The kitchen was visible through a window cut in the wall. Opal was at the stove, stirring something with a wooden spoon so old the handle was smooth as glass. A young man, Darius, was beside her, learning to chop onions with a technique Opal was correcting gently. "Smaller, baby, smaller pieces. You want them to disappear into the gravy, not sit on top of it like tourists." Nathan set the plate on the counter. Opal looked up. "Well, look at you," she said, "bringing the plate back. I knew you were raised right." Nathan looked at the photographs on the wall. He looked at them for a long time. "How long have you been here?" he asked. 41 years. My Aunt Dubby started it before that. So the kitchen's been going for almost 60. 60 years. 60 years of feeding people who need to eat. That's longer than most marriages. Longer than most buildings." She paused. She looked at him. "Longer than most promises." Nathan felt that sentence enter his chest. He looked at the screen door. He looked at the 6 tables. He looked at the glass case with the cornbread and the pie. "I should go," he said. "You should come back tomorrow. It's oxtail." He came back. He sat inside this time. Table 3. Opal brought him a plate without asking. Oxtail, rice, cabbage, cornbread. He ate it at the table like a customer. Darius brought him sweet tea in a plastic cup. The screen door slammed 3 times while he was eating. Each time, a regular walked in, called out to Opal by name, sat down, and received a plate within minutes. No menus, no orders. Opal knew what they wanted because she had been feeding them for years. Nathan watched all of this. He watched a woman run a kitchen the way his father laid bricks, with her hands, with her back, with a knowledge so deep it lived in her bones and not her brain. He watched her move through a space so small most people would call it a closet, and make it feel like the most important room in the city. He watched her call every person baby and mean it every single time. And the stone in his stomach grew heavier with every plate she served. Stay with us, because what happens next will shock you. Day 31, a Tuesday. Opal was outside at noon, carrying the plate across the lot. The last plate she would make for the bench. Not because she planned it that way, because of what happened next. A black SUV pulled into the parking lot. 2 men in suits got out. They walked toward the construction fence, and one of them called out, "Mr. Cross? The city inspector is here. They need your signature on the demolition variance." Nathan was on the bench. Opal was 3 steps away, plate in hand. She stopped. The man in the suit said it again. "Mr. Cross? Nathan Cross?" Nathan closed his eyes. He breathed. Then he stood up from the bench and turned toward the men. "I'll be there in a minute," he said. Opal stood in the parking lot. The plate was in her hands. The rice was steaming. The cornbread was golden. The sweet tea was sweating in the plastic cup. She looked at Nathan. She looked at the men in suits. She looked at the construction fence behind them with the sign she had seen every day for months but never read closely. Crossmark Development. A Nathan Cross company. The plate trembled in her hands. Not from weakness, from understanding. "You're Nathan Cross," she said. Nathan turned to her. He didn't speak. "You own this." She gestured at the fence, the demolition, the machinery, the entire block. "You own all of this." "Yes." "You own my building." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Yes." Opal looked at the plate in her hands. Rice and beans and cornbread and sweet tea. $5.50 worth of food. 41 years of history. 60 years of a kitchen. All of it sitting on a paper plate in the hands of a woman who had been feeding the man who was tearing her world down. 31 days, Opal said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were burning. 31 days you sat on that bench. You ate my food. You let me call you baby. You let me think you were hungry. And the whole time you knew you were taking my kitchen. Opal, don't. She held up her hand. The plate tilted. A bean slid off the edge and landed on the asphalt. You don't get to say my name like that. Not after this. She set the plate on the bench, gently. Even now, even in this moment. She set it down gently because she couldn't disrespect food. It was against everything Aunt Dovey taught her. Then she walked back across the parking lot, through the screen door. It slammed behind her, hard, the hardest it had ever slammed, and she disappeared into the kitchen. Nathan stood in the parking lot. The men in suits were waiting. The demolition crew was waiting. The city inspector was waiting. The entire machinery of progress and profit and development was waiting for his signature. He looked at the plate on the bench. The cornbread was still steaming. He walked past the men in suits. He walked past the construction fence. He got in his car and drove away without signing anything. But the biggest secret hadn't come out yet. Nathan went home. He sat in his 6-bedroom house and he did something he had not done in 20 years of development. He pulled the file on Magnolia Street and read it. Not the financial projections. Not the construction timeline. Not the return on investment calculations. He read the tenant histories, the lease durations, the community impact assessment that his company was legally required to file, but that nobody ever actually read. Building 1, a barbershop operating for 27 years. Building 2, a laundromat, 31 years. Building 3, a tailor shop, 19 years. Building 4, a food service establishment, 41 years. Building 5, a church, 53 years. A church, 53 years. Nathan hadn't known there was a church in the acquisition. He called his project manager. There's a church on the block? Small one, storefront congregation, maybe 40 members. They've been notified. Notified. Standard 60-day notice, Mr. Cross. Nathan hung up. He sat in his kitchen, the marble one, the one with the refrigerator the size of a wall, and he thought about his father, Roland Cross, the bricklayer, the man who said, "Before you build on a man's land, sit on it first." Roland would have sat on that bench. Roland would have eaten the cornbread. But Roland would never have stayed silent about who he was. Because Roland believed that the foundation of any building worth standing in, was honesty. And Nathan had built 31 days on a lie. He picked up the phone and called his lawyer. Pull the Magnolia Street file. I want to review the demolition contracts. Mr. Cross, we're scheduled to break ground in... Pull the file. The lawyer pulled the file. And just when Opal thought she had lost everything, she got a knock on her screen door. It was 7 in the morning, 3 days after the parking lot. Opal was in the kitchen. She had been cooking since 5 because she couldn't sleep, and when she couldn't sleep, she cooked. The kitchen smelled like bacon and biscuits, and the strong black coffee she brewed in a percolator so old the handle was held on with electrical tape. Darius wasn't in yet. The restaurant was empty. The screen door was propped open with the brick. Nathan appeared in the doorway. He was not wearing the scuffed boots or the heavy jacket. He was wearing a suit, a real one. Dark blue, pressed, expensive. His shoes were polished. His beard was trimmed. He looked like a different person. He looked like the person he actually was. Opal saw him and her hand tightened on the spatula. "I'm not open yet," she said. "I know. I'm not here to eat." "Then what are you here for?" Nathan stepped inside. The screen door swung shut behind him. Not a slam this time. A slow, soft close. He set a folder on the counter. He opened it. Inside was a document. "This is the demolition contract for your building," he said. "I'm voiding it." Opal didn't move. She looked at the document. She looked at Nathan. "I don't want your guilt," she said. "This isn't guilt. This is correction." "What's the difference?" Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Guilt is when you feel bad about what you did. Correction is when you change what you're doing. I can't undo 31 days of lying to you, but I can stop the demolition of this building. And the rest of the block, the barber shop, the laundromat, the church?" Nathan looked at her. "The church?" "Greater Hope Baptist. They've been on this block since before I was born. 53 years, 40 members. They baptize babies in a plastic tub in the back room. You're tearing that down for condominiums?" Nathan pressed his hands flat on the counter. He breathed. "I didn't know about the baptisms." "You didn't know because you didn't ask. You sat on a bench and watched a neighborhood, but you never talked to it. You let me feed you for a month, but you never asked me a single question about what this street means. You watched from the outside and you thought that was enough. It's not enough, Nathan. Watching is not the same as seeing." Nathan stared at her. 63 years old, green apron, silk wrap crown, gold tooth catching the morning light. A woman who had fed a stranger for 31 days and asked for nothing, and was now standing in a kitchen she was about to lose, telling a millionaire the difference between watching and seeing. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Opal set the spatula down. She wiped her hands on the kitchen towel. She walked to the wall of photographs. She pointed at one. A group of children sitting at table 4. Paper plates, birthday cake. A banner that said, "Happy 6th birthday, Darius." "That's my nephew's boy. He was 6 in that picture. He's 17 now. He chops my onions every afternoon. His mama worked double shifts at the hotel, and I raised him in this kitchen the same way Aunt Dovey raised me." She pointed at another photograph. A woman in a nurse's uniform, smiling, holding a plate. "That's Carolyn Davis. She ate here every day for 12 years while she was in nursing school. She couldn't afford groceries and tuition at the same time. I never charged her. Not once. She graduated. She works at the hospital now. She still comes every Friday." She pointed at another. An old man in a hat sitting at table 2, sweet tea in his hand. "That's Mr. Avery. He's 89. He comes every morning at 6:15. He orders coffee and cornbread. He sits for 2 hours. He doesn't talk to anyone. He just sits. Because his wife died 3 years ago, and this is the only place that still feels like company." Opal turned to Nathan. "You asked what I want. I want you to look at this wall and tell me what a condominium gives these people that this kitchen doesn't." Nathan looked at the wall. 40 years of photographs, hundreds of faces, birthday parties and church groups and little league teams and nursing students and old men with sweet tea. A neighborhood frozen in frames, laughing and eating and being alive in a room that smelled like fried onions and love. He looked at the demolition contract on the counter, the document that would erase this wall and everything it represented. He picked it up. He tore it in half. Then he tore the halves in half. He set the pieces on the counter. "I need to make some calls," he said. "Are you going to sit on my bench while you make them?" Nathan almost smiled. "Would you bring me a plate if I did?" Opal looked at him. Hard. Measuring. The way she measured flour. By feel, not by scale. Because she had been doing it long enough to know the difference between enough and not enough. "Make your calls first," she said. "Then we'll talk about plates." Now let me tell you what Nathan did. He redesigned the entire Magnolia Street project. Not overnight. It took 4 months. He hired a community architect, a woman named Yolanda Price who specialized in adaptive reuse, which meant she knew how to build new things around old things instead of on top of them. Yolanda walked every block. She talked to every tenant. She sat at table 3 at Opal's and ate oxtail and took notes and asked questions. The new plan kept the original buildings, all of them. The barber shop, the laundromat, the tailor shop, Opal's Place, Greater Hope Baptist Church. The buildings would be renovated, not demolished. New construction would rise behind them and above them. Apartments, yes, but with affordable units mixed in, and ground-floor commercial spaces offered first to existing neighborhood businesses at below-market rent. It was less profitable, significantly less profitable. Nathan's investors pushed back. His project manager called it sentimental. His lawyer called it risky. Nathan called it correction. The redesign cost Crossmark Development $2.1 million in projected revenue. Nathan approved it without hesitation. He told his board that the long-term value of community trust exceeded the short-term value of maximum extraction. 3 board members disagreed. Nathan reminded them whose name was on the company. The renovation of Opal's building began in June. Opal kept cooking during the construction. She cooked through the noise and the dust and the plastic sheeting and the workers who came in and out and who she fed, naturally, because workers are people, and people need to eat. She made them plates and charged them nothing and told them to eat before it got cold, and every single one of them did. Nathan came to the site every Saturday. Not in a suit, in the scuffed boots and the heavy jacket the way his father would have come. He didn't sit on the bench anymore. He worked. He carried materials. He painted walls. He installed the new screen door himself. Same design as the old one, same spring tension, same slam. The first time the new door slammed shut, Opal was in the kitchen. She stopped stirring. She listened. The sound was exactly the same. The echo, the rattle, the way it announced every person who walked in like a small wooden trumpet. She looked through the kitchen window and saw Nathan standing inside, holding a paintbrush, looking at the door he had just installed. "Sounds right," she said. "I matched the spring," he said. "Took 3 tries." "Some things are worth 3 tries." Nathan looked at her. "Some things are worth more." Opal went back to stirring. But she was smiling. The wide one. The one with the gold tooth. The grand reopening was in September. Opal didn't call it a grand reopening. She called it Tuesday. Because it was a Tuesday, and she opened at 6 like she always did, and she cooked smothered pork chops like she always did on Tuesdays, and Mr. Avery was there at 6:15 with his coffee and cornbread like he always was. But the building was different. The walls were new. The kitchen was bigger. Nathan had knocked through into the adjacent space that used to be a storage room. There was a new stove, with 6 burners instead of 4. A new refrigerator that hummed quietly instead of rattling. New chairs at the 6 tables. And the photographs, every single one of them, had been taken down, cleaned, reframed, and hung back in exactly the same positions. Nathan had done this himself. He photographed each placement before the renovation and recreated it nail for nail. There was one new photograph on the wall. It showed a paper plate sitting on a park bench under a sycamore tree. Rice and beans and cornbread and a plastic cup of sweet tea. Nathan had taken it on day 15 with his phone. He had it printed and framed, and he hung it near the screen door with a small brass plate beneath it that read, "The plate that changed everything." Opal saw it on opening day. She stood in front of it for a long time. She touched the frame. She didn't say anything, but Darius, who was standing behind the counter, said he saw her press her fingers to the gold tooth the way she always did when she was trying not to cry. Greater Hope Baptist Church held its first service in the renovated storefront on the last Sunday of September. 43 members, 3 new families. The baptism tub was still plastic. Pastor Coleman said he wouldn't change it even if someone offered him marble. Jesus wasn't baptized in marble, he said. He was baptized in a river. Plastic is closer to a river than marble ever will be. Opal catered the service. She made fried chicken because it was Sunday, and because a week without fried chicken was a week without purpose. She set up a table in the church's fellowship room and served plates to every member and every visitor, and she said to each one, "Eat before it gets cold, baby." Nathan was there. He sat in the back pew. He was wearing the scuffed boots. He ate a plate of fried chicken with his hands, grease on his fingers, sweet tea in a plastic cup, sitting in a church that he had almost destroyed and that was now standing stronger than it had stood in years. After the service, Opal walked over to him. She sat down in the pew beside him. The fellowship room was noisy with laughter and clinking plates and children running between tables. "You know," Opal said, "my Aunt Dovey had a saying." "What's that?" She said, "A full belly is just the beginning. What matters is who filled it, and why." Nathan looked at her. "Why did you feed me, Opal? That first day. You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything. Why did you bring a plate across a parking lot to a man on a bench?" Opal folded her hands in her lap. She looked at the fellowship room, at Mr. Avery sipping coffee, at Darius stacking chairs, at Carolyn Davis laughing with Pastor Coleman, at 40 years of people in one room, eating food she made with her hands. "Because my Aunt Dovey fed me when my mama couldn't, and her mama fed her when nobody else would. And somewhere back before any of us were born, somebody fed somebody because they were hungry, and the food was ready, and there was no reason good enough not to." She looked at Nathan. "That's it. That's the whole recipe. You see someone hungry, you feed them. You don't ask their name first. You don't check their wallet. You just feed them. And you let the food do what food does." "What does food do?" Opal smiled. The gold tooth flashed. "It makes strangers into family, baby. Every time." Nathan looked at the plate in his hands. Empty now. Clean. Licked clean if he was honest. Because the fried chicken was that good. "I think your aunt was right," he said. "My aunt was always right. That's why the screen door's still slamming." One evening in December, exactly 1 year after the renovation began, Opal was closing up. The kitchen was clean. The tables were wiped. The screen door was propped open with the brick, letting the cool evening air drift through. She was counting the register. $342, a good day, when Darius came out of the kitchen holding a small wooden box. "A man dropped this off," Darius said. "Said it was for you." Opal opened the box. Inside was a brass key. Not a regular key, an old-fashioned one, heavy, ornate, the kind that belongs in a storybook. Tied to it with a piece of string was a small card. The card read, "Opal, the building is yours. The deed is in the folder under the key. Paid in full. Nathan." Opal set the box on the counter. She took out the key. She took out the folder. She opened it. Inside was the deed to the building. Her building. The narrow brick building with the screen door and the 6 tables and the kitchen that had been feeding people for 60 years. Transferred to Opal M. Washington. Paid in full. She held the deed in her hands. Her hands were shaking. The gold tooth caught the light from the ceiling fixture. Darius was watching her with wide eyes. "Auntie? What is it?" Opal looked at the deed. She looked at the key. She looked at the wall of photographs. 40 years of faces looking back at her from behind clean glass in new frames, in exactly the same positions on a wall that had been torn down and rebuilt and was still standing. She pressed the deed against her chest. She closed her eyes. "Darius," she said quietly. "Yes, Auntie?" "Go turn the stove back on." "Why? We're closed." Opal opened her eyes. She was smiling. The wide smile. The full one. The one that made her eyes disappear and her gold tooth flash and the whole room feel like it had just been hugged. "Because I need to make a plate and carry it across the parking lot and find a man on a bench and tell him to eat before it gets cold." She tied the apron back on. She turned on the burner. She heated the oil. She made the cornbread from memory, the way Aunt Dovey taught her, by feel, not by scale, the way you make anything that matters, with your hands, with your heart, with 60 years of practice and no intention of stopping. The screen door slammed as Darius went out to find Nathan. And the sound of it, that familiar, wooden, beautiful slam, echoed down Magnolia Street the way it had echoed for 60 years. Through demolitions and renovations and evictions and reprieves, through strangers and regulars and old men with sweet tea and nurses in training and birthday parties at table 4. Still slamming, still welcoming, still saying to everyone who walked through, "You are hungry, and the food is ready, and there is no reason good enough not to come inside." I hope this story stays with you for a while. Please like, share, and subscribe. Tell us in the comments what you would have done differently. We love reading your thoughts. Until next time.